The wind howls at -40 degrees. Ice crystals slice through the air like microscopic knives. A small band of humans huddles in a cave entrance in what will one day be called France. But look closer. This isn't the scene of desperation your history teacher described. A child laughs as her grandmother makes shadow puppets against the firelit wall. Men carefully sort stone blanks for tomorrow's toolmaking. Women stitch waterproof seams with sinew thread so fine it would impress modern tailors. The aroma of roasting mammoth fat fills the shelter. Not the last desperate meal of a dying species, but tonight's feast for a thriving community. This is 25,000 years ago. The last glacial maximum, Earth's most brutal cold snap in human memory. But here's what nobody tells you about the Ice Age. Our ancestors didn't just endure it, they conquered it. While saber-toothed cats froze in their dens and even cold-adapted Neanderthals vanished from the earth, Homo sapiens did something extraordinary. We thrived. The numbers are staggering. Imagine ice sheets 2 miles thick crushing everything from Scandinavia to Scotland. Sea levels plummeting 400 feet. Annual temperatures in Europe averaging 15 degrees Celsius below today's. The Sahara, green and dotted with lakes. The Amazon, a grassland. This wasn't just cold weather, it was an alien planet. For 100,000 years, ice ages had come and gone. But this one was different. Starting around 33,000 years ago, temperatures didn't just drop, they crashed. The world became a freezer, and the door slammed shut for the next 8,000 years. Scientists call it the last glacial maximum. Our ancestors called it home. In caves across Europe and Asia, archaeologists find the evidence. Not huddled skeletons of starvation victims, but the remains of complex communities. At Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic, they uncover ceramic figurines, art created when survival supposedly consumed every waking moment. In Russia, they find houses built from hundreds of mammoth bones, arranged with architectural precision that would challenge modern builders. The stereotypical caveman, dragging his knuckles through the snow, pure fiction. These were engineers who created the world's first weatherproof clothing, artists who painted masterpieces by flickering firelight, traders who moved precious materials thousands of miles across frozen wastes. They were survivors of an apocalypse that lasted longer than all of recorded human history. And they didn't just survive. At Sungir in Russia, archaeologists discover an elderly man buried 34,000 years ago. His grave contains 3,000 mammoth ivory beads, each requiring hours to create. His clothing, reconstructed from the bead patterns, would have taken 2,500 hours to make. This wasn't subsistence. This was sophistication. The Ice Age shaped us, molded our bodies, our minds, our social structures. Every trait that makes us human, from our creativity to our cooperation, was forged in temperatures that would kill an unprepared modern human in hours. This is their story, the greatest survival tale never properly told. Welcome to hell frozen over. Welcome to humanity's finest hour. Imagine waking up to find your entire world changing. Not over centuries, but in decades. Your grandfather's stories of warm summers suddenly become mythology. The berries your mother gathered last year no longer grow. The reindeer migration routes your people followed for generations vanish as if they never existed. This wasn't science fiction. This was the younger Dryas. 12,900 years ago, the world was finally warming. The great ice sheets were retreating. Forests crept north across Europe. Humans spread into new territories, following the warmth like flowers tracking the sun. Then, in perhaps as little as a single human lifetime, winter returned with a vengeance. The numbers defy belief. In Greenland, temperatures plummeted 15 degrees Celsius. Not over millennia, over decades. Ice cores show the change happened in 2 stages. An initial drop of 5 degrees Celsius in just a few years, followed by another 10 degrees Celsius cooling. Imagine New York City's climate suddenly becoming like northern Alaska's. That's what our ancestors faced. But here's what makes this story extraordinary. We have witnesses. In a cave in Syria, archaeologists found something remarkable. Sediment layers from Abu Huraira tell a story written in ancient pollen. Layer by layer, they reveal a paradise transforming into tundra. Wild wheat and rye vanishing. Trees disappearing. In one human generation, a land of plenty became a frozen desert. The villagers' response? They invented agriculture. Faced with starvation, these desperate humans began cultivating the few wild grasses that survived. The younger Dryas didn't just test humanity, it transformed us from wanderers into farmers. Crisis became catalyst. Scientists still debate what triggered this frozen apocalypse. The leading theory sounds like a disaster movie. As North American ice sheets melted, a massive lake formed, Lake Agassiz, larger than all today's Great Lakes combined. When an ice dam burst, fresh water equivalent to all the world's rivers times 100 poured into the Atlantic. This freshwater tsunami shut down ocean currents that bring warmth to Europe. The climate system crashed like a computer hitting a fatal error. Within years, maybe months, the conveyor belt of heat stopped. The Younger Dryas lasted 1,300 years. To put that in perspective, it's longer than the time between the fall of Rome and the Renaissance. Entire cultures rose and fell within this single cold snap. In North America, the Clovis culture, those master hunters with their distinctive spear points, vanished. Their sophisticated toolkit, found from Alaska to Mexico, disappears from the archaeological record like someone erased them. One century they're everywhere, the next, gone. But in their place, new cultures emerged. Diverse, adaptable, innovative. The Folsom people developed even finer projectile points. Coastal peoples turned to the sea. The crisis that killed the mammoths birthed a dozen new ways of being human. The Younger Dryas teaches us something profound. Climate change isn't gradual. It's a switch, not a dial. And when it flips fast. Our ancestors survived temperature swings that make modern climate change look subtle, but they didn't just endure, they evolved. Each crisis forced innovation. Each catastrophe created opportunity. The ice came in a day. But humans? We adapted in a generation. The story was just beginning. Stand where London sprawls today and look up. In your mind's eye, stack 10 Empire State Buildings on top of each other. That's how high the ice towered during the last glacial maximum. 2 miles of grinding, groaning glacier pressing down with the weight of mountains. But here's the breathtaking part. While half of North America lay crushed under ice, just miles away, vast grasslands teemed with life. The Ice Age didn't blanket Earth uniformly in white. It created a patchwork planet of extremes. Where New York City stands, buried under a mile of ice. Siberia, mostly ice-free, a vast steppe stretching from Spain to Alaska. The English Channel, a grassy plain where humans hunted horses. The Grand Banks off Newfoundland, prime real estate for mammoth herds. Sea levels plummeted 400 feet as Earth's water locked into ice. Imagine draining the ocean until continental shelves emerged like Atlantis rising. Indonesia connected to Asia. Britain joined Europe. Japan bridged to Korea. Tasmania merged with Australia. Entire continents appeared from beneath the waves. The jewel in this frozen crown was Beringia. Today, the Bering Strait separates Alaska from Siberia by 55 miles of icy water. But for 100,000 years, this was a grassland twice the size of Texas. Not a narrow bridge, but a vast country in its own right, stretching 1,000 miles north to south. Archaeological evidence from Lake E5 in Alaska reveals something stunning. Humans didn't just cross Beringia, they lived there for thousands of years. Recent studies show distinctive genetic markers in Native Americans that could only develop if their ancestors spent millennia isolated in Beringia before spreading south. They weren't trapped, they were home. The landscape would make modern humans gasp. The mammoth steppe, a unique ecosystem that no longer exists, stretched from Ireland to the Yukon. Neither tundra nor grassland, but something in between. Nutritious grasses, herbs, and Arctic willows fed the greatest concentration of large animals Earth has ever known. A single square mile could support mammoths, woolly rhinoceros, horses, bison, reindeer, muskoxen, and antelope. Lions twice the size of African lions. Bears that dwarfed modern grizzlies. Wolves with bone-crushing jaws. This wasn't a barren wasteland, it was the Serengeti on steroids. The numbers boggle the mind. Paleontologist Dale Guthrie calculated that the mammoth steppe supported 10 times the animal biomass of modern African savannas. Where the Serengeti might have 1 ton of animals per square kilometre, the mammoth steppe had 10. But perhaps the most extraordinary feature was the light. With sea levels down, Earth's reflectivity changed. Clear skies dominated. Summers brought 24-hour daylight to vast regions. Winters were brutal but dry. Siberia received less snow than Chicago gets today. This created perfect conditions for grazing animals, and where prey thrived, humans followed. At Yana River in Siberia, 32,000 years ago, humans built a settlement at 71 degrees north, 500 miles above the Arctic Circle. Not a temporary camp, but a permanent town with hundreds of artifacts. They didn't just survive the Arctic, they chose it. This transformed world created opportunities unimaginable today. You could walk from Paris to New York. Trade routes stretched from Scotland to Siberia without crossing water. Ideas, genes, and innovations flowed across continents. The Ice Age Earth wasn't our planet wrapped in a white blanket. It was a different world entirely, and humans didn't huddle at its edges. We ruled it. In a shelter near the Black Sea, 45,000 years ago, firelight flickers across a woman's concentrated face. In her weathered hands, she holds humanity's future, a sliver of bird bone no bigger than a matchstick. But this isn't just any bone. At one end, rubbed smooth with patient hours of work, sits a tiny hole. The eyed needle, 3 inches of polished bone that would determine who lived and who froze. Before this moment, humans draped themselves in rough hides, effective in mild weather, deadly in the deep cold. Wind sliced through gaps. Snow crept into seams. Body heat escaped like steam from a broken kettle. In temperatures of -40, you had maybe an hour before hypothermia won. But watch what happens next. The woman threads sinew, so fine it's almost invisible, through the eye. With practiced movements, she pierces 2 pieces of reindeer hide, drawing them together in a seam so tight it's waterproof. What emerges isn't just clothing, it's engineering. Dr. Ian Gilligan from the University of Sydney puts it bluntly. Without the needle, humans simply could not have survived north of the 45th parallel during the Ice Age. That's everything north of Portland, Oregon. Half the inhabited world today. The archaeological evidence is stunning. At Denisova Cave in Siberia, needles dating back 50,000 years emerge from the sediment like time capsules. Each one represents thousands of hours of knowledge. Which bones work best? How to shape the eye without breaking it? What angle creates the strongest point? But here's what makes your jaw drop. The diversity. By 35,000 years ago, humans were creating specialized needles. Thick ones from mammoth ivory for heavy-duty parkas, medium ones from swan bones for mid-layers, ultra-fine ones from rabbit bones for decorative work. At the La Prele Mammoth site in Wyoming, archaeologists uncovered 32 needle fragments from at least 13 different animals: foxes, hares, birds, even the now extinct American cheetah. This wasn't crude survival, this was haute couture. The clothing these needles produced defied belief. At Sungir in Russia, a man buried 28,000 years ago wore garments decorated with 3,000 mammoth ivory beads. Each bead took an hour to make. The shirt alone represented a year's worth of work. Archaeologists reconstructed his outfit from the bead positions: fur leggings, a tunic, a cape, boots, and a hat. Form-fitted, layered, styled. Modern cold weather clothing follows identical principles. The Inuit parka, considered the pinnacle of Arctic clothing design, uses the same layering system our ancestors invented 40,000 years ago. Moisture-wicking inner layer, insulating middle layer, windproof outer shell. The only difference? We use synthetic materials. They use bird skins, rabbit fur, and wolf pelts. The needle changed everything. Suddenly, humans could tailor clothes to their bodies, eliminating heat-stealing gaps. They could create multiple thin layers instead of one bulky hide. They could repair garments, making them last years instead of weeks. Most importantly, they could make clothes for children, ensuring the next generation survived. Recent studies from Wyoming reveal another game-changer: decoration. Those ancient needles weren't just punching functional seams. They were adding fur trim, creating patterns, perhaps even embroidering clan symbols. In a world where everyone bundled in furs, your clothing became your identity. One tool, 3 inches long, made from garbage, the bones left after dinner. Yet it opened continents, saved civilizations, and made us who we are. Without it, you wouldn't exist. The needle didn't just save humanity, it made us unstoppable. Layer by layer, she dresses for temperatures that would kill in minutes. First, the base layer, soft bird skins turned inside out, downy feathers against her skin. The Arctic tern pelts feel weightless, but they wick moisture away from her body better than any modern synthetic. Next, the insulation, a tunic made from Arctic hair fur, meticulously sewn with the grain running downward to shed moisture. The sleeves attach with sinew thread so fine it took a specialized needle made from a swan's wing bone. Every seam is double-stitched, then sealed with pine pitch mixed with charcoal. Waterproof, windproof, life-proof. The breakthrough isn't just wearing fur. Bears wear fur and still hibernate. It's the system. At Urin Candide in Italy, a young man buried 23,000 years ago tells the story. His grave contains over 400 shell ornaments arranged in patterns that reveal his clothing. Archaeologists painstakingly reconstructed his outfit: a cap decorated with hundreds of shells, a cloak with fur fringe, leggings with shell garters, and moccasins. This wasn't thrown together, this was designed. But here's what changes everything: the specialized functions of different furs. Ice Age humans understood insulation at a molecular level. Reindeer fur, hollow, and heat trapping formed the primary winter garments. Why? Each hair contains dead air spaces, nature's fiberglass insulation. A reindeer parka weighs 5 pounds, but insulates better than 20 pounds of wool. For the outer layer, wolverine fur. Strange choice? Hardly. Wolverine fur is hydrophobic. It repels water. More importantly, it doesn't accumulate frost from breath. A wolf fur hood rim would ice up in hours. Wolverine stays frost-free even at -50. Modern Arctic explorers still haven't found anything better. The revelations keep coming. Archaeologists studying preserved fur from permafrost sites discovered something remarkable: selective breeding. Ice Age humans weren't just wearing wild animal pelts. They were choosing animals with specific fur qualities, perhaps even managing herds to produce better clothing materials. At Kostenki in Russia, 25,000-year-old tailoring reaches couture levels. Ivory needles so fine they rival modern steel. Decorative fur trim cut in perfect geometric patterns. Boots with separate soles sewn to uppers, a technique we wouldn't reinvent until medieval times. Children's clothing proves most revealing. At multiple sites, miniature versions of adult garments appear. Not rough approximations, but scaled down replicas with the same attention to detail. A child's parka from Siberia used 30 ground squirrel pelts, each prepared separately, then assembled in a complex pattern that maximized insulation while allowing movement. The mathematics are staggering. A complete winter outfit required, 5 reindeer for the main garments, 50 to 100 ground squirrels for underlayers, 2 to 3 wolves for trim, 1 bear for sleeping robes, and countless smaller animals for accessories. One person's clothing represented hundreds of successful hunts. But perhaps the most ingenious innovation was biological. These clothes weren't just worn, they were lived in. The innermost layers developed beneficial bacteria that helped regulate temperature and prevent disease. Like a sourdough starter, these garments improved with age, becoming personal microbiomes that protected their wearers. Modern extreme weather clothing costs thousands and uses space-age materials. Ice Age humans achieved better results with stone tools and animal parts. Their clothing didn't just protect, it regulated temperature, managed moisture, prevented infection, and lasted years. They didn't dress for survival, they dressed for success. And in temperatures that would flash freeze exposed flesh, success meant perfection. Every single stitch. The farmer's shovel strikes something hard in the Ukrainian soil. Probably another rock. But as he clears away the dark earth, a massive curved object emerges, yellowed with age, bigger than any bone should be. A mammoth jaw, locked in place for 15,000 years. What happens next rewrites prehistory. By 1965, archaeologists excavating at Mezhyrich uncover not random bones but architecture. 4 structures built from the remains of at least 149 mammoths. These aren't crude shelters, they're engineered buildings that would challenge modern architects working with conventional materials. The main structure measures 16 feet across. Its foundation, mammoth skulls, each weighing 100 pounds, carefully interlocked with jawbones. The walls, shoulder blades and pelvises stacked like giant shingles. Long bones form arcing supports. Tusks, driven deep into the ground, anchor the entire structure. This is engineering that requires math. Dr. Olga Sofer, who studied these sites for decades, calculated the weight. Each house used 20 tons of bone. That's 40,000 pounds of material that had to be collected, transported, and precisely placed. In a world without wheels, pulleys, or draft animals. But here's what makes archaeologists' minds real. The bones show weathering. These weren't fresh kills. Ancient humans scavenged skeletal remains from natural death sites, sometimes miles away. They selected specific bones for specific purposes. Skulls for foundations, scapulars for walls, femurs for rafters. This wasn't desperation architecture, this was planned. The construction technique defies belief. At Dobranichevka, builders created interlocking joints between bones, like prehistoric Lincoln logs. Tusks were heated and bent into curves, a technique requiring precise temperature control. Some bones show evidence of drilling and lashing. These builders understood load distribution, wind resistance, and thermal dynamics. Inside, the sophistication continues. Clear activity zones emerge. Sleeping areas lined with Arctic fox fur, workspaces near the light, storage pits dug into permafrost. At Mezin, archaeologists found a painted mammoth skull. When struck, It resonates at different pitches. The world's first drum, built into the architecture itself. The burning question, why bones? Wood was scarce on the periglacial steppe, but that's only part of the answer. Bone has properties wood lacks. It's naturally water resistant. Its density provides superior insulation, critical when outside temperatures hit -50. The marrow cavities trap dead air, creating additional insulation. A mammoth bone house maintained internal temperatures 40 degrees warmer than outside. Recent discoveries push the mystery deeper. At Kostenki, a massive circular structure from 25,000 years ago used bones from at least 60 mammoths. But this wasn't a house. No sleeping areas, no clear hearths. Instead, evidence of large-scale burning and possible ritual use. A monument, a community center, a prehistoric cathedral. The logistics stagger imagination. Moving a single mammoth skull required multiple people. Constructing one house meant coordinating dozens of workers. This wasn't a family project, it was community architecture. The bones had to be sorted, prepared, and assembled in sequence. One mistake and tons of material could come crashing down. These structures lasted centuries. At some sites, evidence shows repeated rebuilding on the same spots, suggesting inherited property or sacred spaces. Imagine architectural traditions passed down for generations, each family adding their own modifications while maintaining the core design. The symbolism can't be ignored. You're living inside the beast that symbolized the Ice Age, sleeping within its ribs, entering through its jaws. This wasn't just shelter, it was a statement. We conquered the mammoth so completely. We dwell within its bones. Modern architects study these structures for insights into sustainable design. No metal, no concrete, no industrial tools. Yet they created buildings that survived 15,000 years. In a frozen wasteland, with stone tools and bare hands, our ancestors built monuments from death itself. And they called them home. In the depths of the Korman 9 site in Ukraine, archaeologist William Murphy brushes away 23,000 years of sediment. What emerges challenges everything we thought we knew about Ice Age survival. 3 distinct hearths, each telling a different story, each burning at 600 degrees Celsius, as hot as a modern campfire. But here's the mystery that keeps scientists awake. During the last glacial maximum, Earth's deepest freeze, evidence of fire almost vanishes. How do you survive -50 without fire? The answer reveals human ingenuity that borders on impossible. At Korman 9, microscopic analysis shows these weren't random fires. Each hearth served a specific purpose. The large one, communal heating and cooking. The medium, tool production, maintaining exact temperatures for heat-treating flint. The small, specialized craftwork requiring precise heat control. These people understood fire like modern chemists understand reactions, but the real innovations lay in fuel. Wood was precious on the steppe, a few dwarf willows, some Arctic birch. Burning it all meant death. So our ancestors innovated bonfires, fat lamps, dung furnaces. Each fuel source required different techniques, different structures, different knowledge. Archaeologist Alexander Pryor discovered something stunning at Kostenki. Burned bone fragments revealed temperatures exceeding 650 degrees Celsius. You can't achieve that by tossing bones on a fire. It requires forced air, prehistoric bellows. It requires specific bone preparation. It requires understanding that bone marrow, rendered at exact temperatures, burns hotter than wood. The fat lamp revolution changed everything. A hollowed stone, seal blubber, a moss wick, simple ingredients, world-changing results. These lamps burned for days without refueling. No smoke, steady heat, portable light. In the permanent darkness of Arctic winter, these weren't luxuries, they were lifelines. At Dolny Vestonishi 26,000 years ago, someone discovered ceramic technology. Not for pots, for heating. They created ceramic heating elements that stored and radiated warmth hours after the fire died. Archaeologists found hundreds of ceramic fragments, all fired at temperatures revealing precise thermal control. But why does fire evidence disappear during the coldest period? Dr. Vera Aldias from the University of Algarve proposes something radical. They didn't need as much fire because they engineered around it. Super-insulated mammoth bone houses. Clothing so efficient it made heating less critical. Underground storage that used permafrost as refrigeration. Body heat alone in properly designed shelters with 30 people could maintain survivable temperatures. The evidence supports this. At sites from the last glacial maximum, we find different adaptations. Smaller, more efficient hearths. Centralized community fires rather than individual ones. Heat banking systems using stones. Like a prehistoric district heating system, one fire serving multiple families. The most ingenious discovery comes from Siberia. Fire-cracked rock in specific patterns reveals a technique lost to time. Hot stone cooking. Stones heated in fires then dropped into hide-lined pits filled with water. The water boils, food cooks, no smoke to attract predators or enemies. No wasted fuel. Maximum caloric extraction from minimum resources. Children learned fire before they could properly walk. At multiple sites, miniature fire-making kits appear in children's burial goods. Tiny striker lights, practice tinder, the skills that meant survival, taught from infancy. But perhaps the most profound innovation was psychological. Fire wasn't just warmth, it was community. The hearth became humanity's first social network. Stories told, knowledge shared, bonds forged. In a world where darkness lasted months, fire created an artificial day where culture could flourish. Modern survival experts marvel at these techniques. Navy SEALs trained to make fire in extreme conditions. Arctic researchers carry multiple backup systems. Our ancestors did it with rocks, fungus, and animal fat. Every single day, for thousands of years, without matches, without failure. Because failure meant more than discomfort. Failure meant extinction. The fires of the Ice Age never truly died. They just learned to hide, burning in the most unlikely places, tended by the most unlikely species, tropical apes who refused to freeze. And in those flames, civilization was forged. Forget everything Hollywood taught you about mammoth hunting. The scene, a massive bull mammoth, 9 tons of muscle and fury, charges across the frozen steppe. In movies, fur-clad hunters hurl spears at the beast, whooping as they chase it toward a cliff. Pure fantasy. Try throwing a spear hard enough to penetrate 4 inches of tough hide, a layer of fat, and then reach vital organs. Physics laughs at your puny human arms. The reality was genius. UC Berkeley archaeologist Scott Byram just shattered decades of assumptions. Those famous Clovis points, the Ferrari of Stone Age weapons, weren't mounted on throwing spears. They were pikes, planted in the ground, angled precisely, waiting. The kind of energy you can generate with the human arm is nothing like the kind of energy generated by a charging animal, explains Dr. Jun Sunseri. It's an order of magnitude different. Picture it. You've studied mammoth behavior for generations. You know their routes, their blind spots, their charge patterns. You place your pikes in a bottleneck, maybe a narrow valley, maybe between 2 rock outcrops. The business end faces the oncoming beast at exactly the right angle. Then you become bait. The mammoth charges. 9 tons of momentum meets an immovable spike. The animal's own weight drives the point deep, deeper than any human could achieve. It's Aikido with extinction-level consequences. The engineering was exquisite. Clovis points weren't just sharp rocks. They were hafted with split wooden shafts, bound with sinew, reinforced with pine pitch. The bases were ground smooth to prevent splitting on impact. Some show impact fractures consistent with massive force, the kind only a charging megafauna could generate. But Clovis was just the beginning. At Schöningen in Germany, archaeologists uncovered 400,000-year-old wooden spears that rewrote the textbook. These weren't crude pointed sticks. They were engineered like modern javelins, thickest and heaviest at the front third for maximum penetration, tapered for aerodynamics, balanced for throwing. Olympic athletes tested replicas. The result? Accurate throws exceeding 70 meters. The innovation cascade never stopped. Spear throwers, the atlatl, appeared 30,000 years ago. This simple lever multiplied throwing force by 400%. Suddenly, hunters could launch projectiles at 150 kilometers per hour. Modern tests show these could penetrate elephant hide at 40 meters. By 20,000 years ago, the bow appears. Not the simple bent stick of cartoons, but compound constructions using horn, sinew, and specially selected wood. African hunters still using traditional bows can put an arrow through a buffalo at 50 paces. Ice Age versions were likely more powerful. But here's what archaeology just revealed. Specialized ammunition. Different points for different prey. Broad, thin points for reindeer, maximizing bleeding. Thick, narrow points for mammoth, designed to break ribs and penetrate deep. Barbed points for fish. Blunt points for birds. At La Prairie in Wyoming, microscopic analysis shows points were even specialized by season. Sharper edges for winter when hides were thickest. The most ingenious weapon, the persistence hunt. Humans can't outrun prey, but we can outlast them. Our superpower isn't speed, it's endurance. Wolves tire after 20 minutes. Humans can run for hours. In Africa, hunters still pursue antelope until heat exhaustion drops them. In the Ice Age, fresh snow revealed tracks. A wounded animal left blood trails. Human hunters working in relays could pursue for days. Weapons were just tools. The real innovation was psychological. Ice Age hunters thought like their prey. They knew reindeer moved into wind, so they hunted downwind. They knew mammoths protected calves, so they created diversions. They knew horses spooked at certain sounds, so they invented noisemakers. At Starcar in Britain, 11,000 years ago, hunters wore deerskull headdresses, not for ritual, for camouflage. Red deer accept other deer approaching closer than obvious humans. Those extra meters meant the difference between success and starvation. Every innovation built on the last. Hafting led to composite tools. Composite tools enabled specialized functions. Specialization drove efficiency. Efficiency meant surplus. Surplus enabled culture. We didn't conquer the Ice Age with brute force. We did it with physics, psychology, and patience. The mammoth never stood a chance. Watch the master at work. She sits cross-legged, a leather pad across her lap, examining a chunk of flint like a diamond cutter studying a precious stone. This isn't random rock bashing. This is engineering at the molecular level. She sees what others can't. The path of force through crystalline structures, the hidden flaws that determine where stone will break, the perfect angle that transforms mineral into masterpiece. With her antler hammer, she strikes. Once. The flint splits exactly where intended, revealing a surface that gleams like black glass. But she's just beginning. Welcome to the Swiss Army knife of the Stone Age. By 40,000 years ago, tool-making had evolved from crude chopping to precision manufacturing. The archaeological record reveals over 60 distinct tool types from the Upper Paleolithic. Not variations, Completely different tools for completely different jobs. It's like finding a hardware store frozen in time. The revolution started with a breakthrough: blade technology. Instead of making one tool from one stone, Ice Age innovators discovered how to create multiple standardized blades from a single core, like peeling identical slices from an apple. One basketball-sized core could yield 50 razor-sharp blades. Each blade then became raw material for specialized tools. The diversity staggers modern archaeologists. Burins for engraving, so precise they could carve microscopic lines in ivory. End scrapers for hide preparation, with edges worn smooth from processing thousands of pelts. Backed bladelets, tiny geometrics that formed composite tools. Borers for precision drilling, notched tools for shaft straightening. But here's what changes everything: hafting. 35,000 years ago, someone figured out how to attach stone to wood. Simple concept, world-changing implications. Suddenly tools had leverage, they had reach, they had replaceability. Break your spear point, pop in a new one. Different task, different attachment. The multi-tool was born. At Pinsevent in France, archaeologists uncovered an Ice Age workshop frozen in time. 15,000 years ago, someone sat here making tools. The debris patterns reveal their technique: controlled pressure flaking using antler tines to remove flakes thinner than paper. The precision equals modern surgical instruments. Regional styles emerged like prehistoric patents: Solutrean points from France and Spain, so thin light passes through them. Crafted using heat treatment and pressure flaking, their art masquerading as tools. Russian sites yield different innovations. Large unifacial tools perfect for heavy butchering. Each region's toolkit adapted to local resources and needs. The real genius lay in composite tools. At Mezhirish, archaeologists found grooved bones that puzzled them for years. Then someone noticed the grooves exactly fit microliths. These were handles holding rows of tiny stone inserts. Prehistoric razors with replaceable blades. When one dulled, pop it out, slide in fresh. The invention of modular technology, 20,000 years before modules. Children learned by doing. Sites yield thousands of practice pieces. Failed attempts at replicating adult tools, the learning curve was steep. Modern experimental archaeologists need months to achieve basic competence. Ice Age children started at 5, mastered techniques by 15. Their lives depended on it. Heat treatment revolutionized possibilities. By 72,000 years ago in South Africa, humans discovered that heating silkreed to precise temperatures transformed its molecular structure. Brittle stone became workable. Difficult materials became cooperative. It's material science that wouldn't be rediscovered until the Industrial Revolution. Tool caches reveal forward thinking. At multiple sites, prepared cores and rough tools lie buried. Prehistoric supply depots. Hunters traveling light could stop, grab pre-made tools, continue the chase. It's logistics management from the Pleistocene. The pinnacle, pressure flaking. Using antler or bone, craftsmen could remove flakes atom thin. The control was absolute. They could create serrated edges with teeth smaller than rice grains. Notches precise enough to hold sinew threads, points so sharp they slice paper after 20,000 years. But tools were more than function. They were identity. French Magdalenian points differ from German ones. Spanish styles distinct from Russian. Like accents in stone, these differences proclaimed origin. In a world of small bands and vast distances, your tools said who you were. Modern humans struggle to replicate these techniques with metal tools. Our ancestors did it with rocks, bones, and patience. Each strike required understanding of physics. Each tool demanded hours of focused work. Each innovation built on generations of knowledge. They didn't just chip stones, they transformed matter itself, one calculated blow at a time. The toolkit of the Ice Age wasn't primitive, it was precision incarnate. The mammoth charges, 9 tons of fury thundering across the frozen steppe. In our imagination, fur-clad hunters scatter as tusks sweep through the air. But step into the archaeological tent at Cavemen, Austria, and a different story emerges from 24,000-year-old bones. Here's what shocks researchers. Of thousands of bones meticulously catalogued, over 90% belong to one animal. Not the mighty mammoth, not the fierce cave bear, reindeer. "Look at these antlers," says Dr. Kirsten Pastor, running her fingers along a still-attached skull. "Winter kills everyone." This wasn't random hunting. These Ice Age humans specifically targeted reindeer in their prime winter coats, when the fur was thickest, warmest, and most water-resistant. While we've been obsessed with mammoth hunters, the real survival story was following the reindeer. Think about it. A mammoth provides massive amounts of meat, yes, but catching one, that's lottery odds. Reindeer, however, moved in predictable patterns. They migrated with the seasons, they gathered in groups. Most importantly, they provided everything: meat, fur, sinew, antler, and bone. The isotope analysis tells us these hunters weren't opportunists, they were specialists. Tooth wear patterns on human remains match a diet consistently high in reindeer meat. Cut marks on bones show practiced, efficient butchery. These people knew reindeer anatomy like surgeons. But here's the revelation. The age profiles show they primarily hunted calves and yearlings, not because they were easier targets, but because young reindeer fur is the finest insulation nature ever created. 1 square inch contains more hollow hairs than any other deer species, perfect for trapping warm air. At the same site, archaeologists found 62-eyed needles. 62. That's not clothing repair, that's a textile factory. These weren't just making simple garments. The needle sizes vary from thick bone piercers to delicate implements finer than modern steel needles. They were making fitted garments, explains textile archaeologist Dr. Ian Gilligan. Parkas with integrated hoods, mittens attached with sinew cords, boots with multiple layers. The genius lay in timing. Reindeer grow their winter coat in September. By November it's fully prime. Hunt too early, the fur is thin. Too late, and spring shedding begins. Ice Age humans had perhaps a 6-week window to secure an entire year's clothing materials. Unlike the random distribution of mammoth sites, reindeer hunting camps cluster along migration routes. Generation after generation return to the same spots. At Pinsevent in France, archaeologists can trace 12,000 years of continuous reindeer hunting at one river crossing. This challenges our entire image of Ice Age survival. While mammoth hunting was spectacular, and yes, it happened, reindeer were the everyday reality. They were reliability in a world of uncertainty. They were survival dressed in fur. Your ancestors didn't dream of mammoth steaks. They dreamed of reindeer migrations, and those dreams kept them alive. In the archaeological storage room at the University of Tübingen, Dr. Amanda Henry holds up a microscopic slide. What she's seeing rewrites Ice Age history. It's not a stone tool or ancient bone. It's 30,000-year-old dental plaque, and it's full of plants. Starch grains, she says, adjusting the microscope. Lots of them. This Neanderthal was eating his vegetables. For decades, we've imagined Ice Age humans as pure carnivores, surviving on mammoth steaks and reindeer haunches. The truth? They were eating salads. Well, Ice Age salads. Cattail roots, hawthorn berries, wild carrots, and dozens of other plants we're just beginning to identify. The evidence comes from the most unlikely source: fossilized plaque on ancient teeth. This biological garbage turns out to be a time capsule. Using new extraction techniques, researchers can identify plant cells, starch grains, even pollen trapped in prehistoric dental tartar. This changes everything, says Henry. These people had encyclopedic knowledge of plants. At Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic, the evidence is even more dramatic. Here, 30,000 years ago, someone built what can only be called a processing facility. Grinding stones, some weighing 50 pounds, show polish from thousands of hours of use. Microscopic analysis reveals they weren't grinding pigments or minerals, they were processing plants. The wear patterns tell a specific story: circular motions for seeds, back and forth grinding for roots, different stones for different plants. This wasn't casual food preparation, this was systematic processing on an almost industrial scale. But why? The answer lies in human biology. Our brains consume 20% of our calories, twice that of other primates. Meat provides protein and fat, but the brain runs on glucose. And the most efficient source of glucose? Starch from plants. Dr. Karen Hardy from the University of Barcelona made another startling discovery. Some of these plant starches show evidence of cooking. They've been gelatinized by heat. This means Ice Age humans weren't just gathering plants. They were transforming them through cooking, making nutrients more available. The timing is significant. Around 30,000 years ago, as the last glacial maximum approached, a new technology exploded across Europe. Ground stone tools, not for hunting, not for weapons, for plants. It's a technological revolution we've ignored, explains archaeologist Dr. Emanuela Cristiani. Grinding technology appears simultaneously from Spain to Russia. That suggests desperate need. Consider what this means. As the world grew colder and game became scarcer, humans didn't just suffer, they innovated. They turned to foods that required processing: tough roots, hard seeds, fibrous tubers, foods that other predators couldn't access. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, 50,000-year-old Neanderthal remains tell an even more complex story. The dental calculus contains not just food plants, but medicinal ones: chamomile and yarrow. These have no nutritional value. They're bitter, they're medicine. The plant knowledge required staggers the imagination. Which roots are edible after processing? Which seeds become toxic when old? Which berries can be dried for winter? Where to dig for tubers under snow? This wasn't casual knowledge. It was survival itself. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Our ancestors' plant knowledge puts us to shame. They knew hundreds of species. Modern hunter-gatherers still do. The Hadza of Tanzania use over 300 plant species. Ice Age Europeans likely knew as many. We've been telling the wrong story. The Ice Age wasn't survived on meat alone. It was survived on botanical knowledge so deep, so complex, that we're only beginning to understand it 30,000 years later. Your ancestors weren't just hunters, they were botanists. And that knowledge may have been the difference between extinction and survival. The cave entrance is 120 feet underwater now, accessible only to divers. But 20,000 years ago, Henri Cosquer would have walked into this chamber near Marseille. On the walls, something unprecedented in Ice Age art: seals, fish, and what appears to be a jellyfish. Our ancestors had discovered the sea. For most of human evolution, the ocean was a barrier, not a resource. Fishing requires specialized tools, knowledge of tides, understanding of seasonal spawns. It's complicated, dangerous. But as the last glacial maximum locked fresh water in ice, coastal resources became lifelines. At the Cueva de Neria in Spain, the evidence is undeniable. Layer after layer of shells, fish bones, and seal remains. But look closer, these aren't random collections. The fish vertebrae tell a story. 80% are from spring spawning species. These people understood seasonal fish runs. Dr. Miguel Cortez Sanchez holds up a bone that makes archaeologists' hearts race. A curved fish hook, 16,000 years old, carved from deer bone. It's not crude. The barb is carefully angled. The shank shows wear from line attachment. This is sophisticated technology. But hooks are just the beginning, he explains. We've found gorges, straight bone pins that fish swallow, toggle harpoons, net weights. These people had a whole fishing toolkit. The net weights change everything. A single fisherman with a hook catches one fish. A group with nets can harvest hundreds. At sites along the Mediterranean, stone weights appear in standard sizes, suggesting standardized nets. This isn't subsistence, it's industry. Here's what's revolutionary. Isotope analysis of human bones from coastal sites shows marine proteins making up 50% of the diet. Not occasionally, consistently, for generations. These weren't land hunters who occasionally ate fish. They were maritime specialists. The Japanese islands tell an even more dramatic story. At sites like Natsushima 9,000 years ago, tuna bones appear. Tuna don't come close to shore. Catching them requires boats, deep water knowledge, and incredible skill. Ice Age humans had become seafarers. But the most stunning evidence comes from the Channel Islands of California. At Daisy Cave, John Erlandson's team found something that shouldn't exist. 13,000-year-old shell fishhooks. The islands were never connected to the mainland. People had to boat there. This wasn't accidental drift, Erlandson emphasizes. They brought tools, established camps, and exploited marine resources. They were maritime people. The nutritional implications stagger. Fish provide omega-3 fatty acids crucial for brain development. Shellfish offer minerals scarce in terrestrial foods. Seaweed, yes, they ate it, provides iodine essential for thyroid function. The ocean wasn't just food, it was a pharmacy. Consider the knowledge required. Tides that expose shellfish beds. Spawning seasons for different species. Which fish school where. How to read currents. Where seals haul out. This isn't learned overnight. It's generational knowledge. At Pinnacle Point in South Africa, the story goes back even further. 164,000 years ago, humans were systematically harvesting shellfish. The behavior appears during a glacial period when inland resources crashed. The ocean saved them. The technology evolved rapidly, from simple shells with natural edges to crafted hooks, from hand gathering to nets. From shore foraging to deep water hunting, each innovation opened new ecological niches. But perhaps most remarkably, coastal sites show less seasonal stress than inland ones. Isotope analysis reveals steadier nutrition year-round. While inland hunters faced feast or famine cycles, coastal peoples had the ocean's buffet. The dive at Koskua Cave revealed one final detail. Among the painted fish is a great auk, a flightless seabird extinct for centuries. The artist painted from life, capturing details only direct observation could provide. Ice Age humans didn't just discover the sea, they mastered it, and in mastering it, they found a resource that would sustain humanity through the harshest conditions Earth could offer. Your ancestors weren't just hunters and gatherers, they were fishermen. And that third revolution may have been the most important of all. The footprints in Willandra Lakes, Australia, tell a 20,000-year-old story. A group walking together, adults, teenagers, children. One set of prints shows someone running, probably chasing prey. Another walks with a limp, helped by someone beside them. This wasn't just a hunting party, this was a family. In a world where temperatures could kill in hours, where predators hunted in packs, where a broken ankle meant death, humans discovered the ultimate survival technology: each other. The basic unit wasn't the individual, explains anthropologist Dr. Polly Wiesner. It was the band, 25 to 30 people bound by kinship and trust. Lose your band, lose your life. Modern hunter-gatherers give us windows into this world. The Juhonsi of the Kalahari still live in bands remarkably similar to our Ice Age ancestors. No chiefs, no formal leaders. Decisions through discussion. Power through persuasion, not force. But how does a group function without hierarchy? The answer challenges everything modern humans assume about organization. Ice Age bands operated on principles so effective they sustained humanity for 95% of our existence. First principle: radical sharing. At the Pinsevent site in France, archaeologists mapped exactly where reindeer carcasses were butchered 12,000 years ago. The distribution pattern is telling. Meat spread evenly across all hearths. No family hoarded. Everyone ate, or no one did. This wasn't communist ideology, it was survival mathematics. A single hunter's success was random. Share today, eat tomorrow, when your hunt fails. The math is brutal. In the Arctic, a lone hunter has a 1 in 20 chance of daily success. A band sharing has 19 in 20. Second principle: flexible leadership. Among the Netsilik Inuit studied before modernization, leadership shifted with context. Best tracker leads the hunt. Best seamstress organizes clothing production. Elder with geographic memory guides migration. Authority was situational, not permanent. This is sophisticated political organization, notes Dr. Christopher Bohm. It requires suppressing ego for group benefit. Very few modern humans can do this. The archaeological evidence supports this. Burial sites from the Gravettian period show remarkably equal treatment. No king's tombs, no wealth disparities. A child buried at Sunghir 28,000 years ago wears 5,000 ivory beads, but so do the adults. Status came from age and skill, not inheritance. Third principle: conflict resolution without violence. Modern forager bands show us how. Mockery for selfishness, storytelling that subtly criticizes, group pressure through silence. If these fail, the ultimate sanction: the band splits. Richard Lee documented this social velocity among the Juhonsi. Bands regularly fission over conflicts, then rejoin when tempers cool. The archaeological record shows similar patterns. Sites occupied, abandoned, reoccupied, in cycles suggesting social rather than resource dynamics. But here's what's remarkable. Band society included everyone. At Shanidar Cave, a Neanderthal survived multiple injuries that left him partially blind, missing one arm and limping. He lived for years after these injuries. Someone fed him, someone protected him. The band carried him. At Kafse Cave in Israel, a child with severe developmental disabilities was buried with elaborate care 100,000 years ago. Red ochre, shells, deer antlers, the same treatment as anyone else. These weren't societies that abandoned the weak, they incorporated them. The emotional technology was as crucial as the physical. Laughter around fires, songs that bound groups, stories that encoded survival information, teasing that prevented dominance, grief rituals that processed loss. Without these, bands fragmented. We think of emotional intelligence as modern, says Dr. Sarah Hurdy, but Ice Age survival required reading micro-expressions, managing jealousy, building trust. They were emotional athletes. The magic number appears consistently: 25 to 30 people. Large enough for genetic diversity, small enough for everyone to know everyone. Split into family groups but functioning as one unit. This wasn't coincidence. It was optimization refined over millennia. Modern humans struggle to maintain more than 150 meaningful relationships, Dunbar's number. But we can deeply trust only 15 to 30. That's not a bug in our psychology. It's an Ice Age feature. We're still wired for band society. When climate crashed and megafauna died, when glaciers advanced and resources vanished, bands survived. Not through individual heroics, but through collective competence. They proved something profound. Humans aren't just social animals. We're hyper-cooperators. And that cooperation, refined in Ice Age crucibles, made us unstoppable. Your ancestors didn't conquer the Ice Age through strength or intelligence alone. They survived through something far more powerful, each other, a dolny viestonish. The 26,000-year-old burial stops archaeologists cold, an elderly woman, probably 50 years old, ancient by Ice Age standards, her teeth worn to nubs, her joints arthritic. By all logic, she should have died years ago. Yet here she lies, covered in red ochre, buried with the same care as the youngest hunter. Someone valued this grandmother. Someone kept her alive. In our brutal image of Ice Age survival, the elderly seem like burdens, too slow to hunt, too weak to travel, extra mouths when every calorie counts. But the archaeological record tells a radically different story. Old people didn't just survive, they were essential. The human lifespan is an evolutionary puzzle, explains Dr. Kristen Hawkes, who developed the grandmother hypothesis. Chimpanzees rarely live past menopause. Most mammals die when reproduction ends, but human females live decades beyond fertility. Why? The answer revolutionizes our understanding of Ice Age survival. Grandmothers weren't burdens, they were libraries. In a world without writing, they were Google. Their knowledge meant life or death. Consider plant gathering, responsible for 70% of calories in most hunter-gatherer societies. At Ohalo 2 in Israel, archaeologists found 23,000-year-old grinding stones with residue from over 140 plant species. Each plant had its season, its location, its preparation method. Eat the wrong part, you die. Process it incorrectly, you starve. This isn't casual knowledge, emphasizes ethnobotanist Dr. Nancy Turner. Indigenous grandmothers today know thousands of plant details. Ice Age grandmothers knew more. The Hadza of Tanzania offer a glimpse. Elderly women know which tubers grow where, even when invisible underground. They remember fruiting cycles across decades. They can identify edible plants from poisonous lookalikes by subtle differences in leaf serrations. This knowledge takes 50 years to accumulate. But plants were just the beginning. At sites across Ice Age Europe, we find evidence of complex seasonal rounds, movements between resource patches timed with precision. Who remembered that the salmon ran early in hot summers, that certain valleys held snow late, preserving game? Grandmothers. The biological evidence is compelling. Human children have the longest dependency period of any mammal. They can't feed themselves effectively until adolescence. Someone must provision them. Mothers, they're often pregnant or nursing. Fathers, they're hunting. Who fills the gap? Grandmothers. Studies of modern hunter-gatherers prove this. Hadza children with living grandmothers are 50% more likely to survive to adulthood. They're better nourished, they learn faster. The grandmother effect is measurable, dramatic, and universal. At Sunghir in Russia, genetic analysis of 34,000-year-old burials revealed something unexpected. The elderly woman buried there wasn't related to the children nearby. She was caring for children who weren't her biological grandchildren. Alloparenting, cooperative child rearing, extended beyond genetic lines. This is uniquely human, notes Dr. Sarah Hurdy. No other primate does this. Ice Age survival required networks of care beyond the nuclear family. The knowledge transfer was staggering. Medicine comes from grandmothers. At El Cedron in Spain, Neanderthal dental calculus contains compounds from medicinal plants, chamomile for inflammation, poplar bark containing aspirin precursors. This pharmaceutical knowledge was transmitted across generations. Craft knowledge, too. The oldest-eyed needles cluster at sites with multiple generations present. Venus figurines, those mysterious female sculptures, often depict elderly women. Were they honoring the knowledge keepers, the teachers of essential skills? Here's what changes everything. Modeling ancestral populations shows that groups with post-reproductive females had massive advantages. They could support more children, transmit more cultural knowledge, survive resource crashes. Grandmothers weren't just helpful, they were evolutionary drivers. The emotional technology matters too. Grandmothers in forager societies are the conflict resolvers, the matchmakers, the storytellers who encode survival information in memorable narratives. They're the social glue when bands threaten to fragment. At Shanidar Cave, the famous flower burial might tell this story. The elderly individual was buried with medicinal plants, a healer, a knowledge keeper, someone valued not for strength, but for wisdom. The math is inescapable. Ice Age bands that supported elderly women had more surviving grandchildren. Those grandchildren carried genes for longevity. The cycle reinforced itself. Grandmothers created the conditions for their own evolution. This challenges our youth-obsessed culture's assumptions. In the harshest conditions humans ever faced, age wasn't weakness, it was wealth. Not physical wealth, but something more valuable, knowledge that meant survival. Your existence proves this. You're here because Ice Age bands valued their grandmothers, because someone 30,000 years ago decided that keeping an arthritic elder alive was worth the calories. That decision echoes through time. The Ice Age wasn't survived by the young and strong alone. It was survived by communities wise enough to value experience over strength, knowledge over youth, wisdom over vigor. Grandmothers didn't just help our ancestors survive the Ice Age. They may have been the reason we survived at all. The beads tell a love story 30,000 years old. Found at Dolny Vestonich, they're made from shells that traveled 500 kilometers from the Mediterranean. But here's the puzzle. Identical beads appear at sites hundreds of kilometers apart. These weren't trade goods. They were engagement rings, Ice Age style. In a world of tiny bands scattered across frozen continents, finding a mate outside your family group wasn't just preferable, it was mandatory. The genetic math is unforgiving. Bands of 25 to 30 people contain maybe 5 to 7 potential partners in your age range. Half are your siblings or cousins. Inbreeding meant extinction. The solution was breathtaking in scope, explains geneticist Dr. Connie Mulligan. Ice Age humans created mate exchange networks spanning thousands of square kilometers. These weren't random hookups, they were diplomatic missions. The evidence comes from multiple sources. Strontium isotope analysis of teeth reveals where people grew up versus where they died. At Sunghair in Russia, young adults show isotope signatures from regions 200 kilometers away. They moved for marriage. But how did isolated bands even know each other existed? The answer lies in aggregation sites, locations where multiple bands gathered seasonally. Pinsevent in France shows evidence of such gatherings. During reindeer migrations, the site hosted not 30 people, but 300. It was speed dating, Ice Age edition, jokes archaeologist Dr. Meg Conkey, but with life or death stakes. The material evidence is striking. Jewelry styles, specific bead types, pendant designs, decoration patterns spread along predictable routes, not randomly like trade goods, but in clusters suggesting marriage networks. A woman buried at Pavlov Hills wears beads matching styles from sites 400 kilometers away. She likely brought them from her birth band. Personal ornaments served as identity markers. Shell types indicated coastal origins. Amber meant Baltic connections. Specific tooth pendants showed group affiliation. In a world without Facebook, jewelry was your profile. The logistics stagger modern minds. Young adults walking hundreds of kilometers through glaciated landscapes to find partners. But ethnographic evidence from recent hunter-gatherers shows similar patterns. Australian Aboriginal groups maintained marriage networks across continental scales. These weren't one-way trips. Genetic evidence shows bi-directional movement, suggesting complex alliance systems. A woman might move to her husband's band, but her brothers would seek wives from other groups, creating web-like connections across the landscape. At Ksarakil in Lebanon, 40,000 years old, archaeologists found what might be history's first love token, a fox-tooth pendant with microscopic residue of red pigment, worn against skin, transferred to a beloved. We'll never know, but someone cared enough to carry it from Europe to the Levant. These objects had biographies, explains Dr. Clive Gamble. They moved with people, accumulated memories, symbolized relationships. The social negotiations were complex. Which band gave more partners? How were alliances balanced? What happened when partnerships failed? Modern foragers show elaborate protocols, gift exchanges, multi-year negotiations, ritual fights that established hierarchy without bloodshed. Language barriers? Probably minimal. Linguistic analysis suggests Ice Age Europe had far fewer languages than today. Marriage networks would have standardized communication across regions. Love requires conversation. The genetic evidence is unequivocal. Ice Age humans maintained remarkable genetic diversity despite small populations. No signs of systematic inbreeding. Mitochondrial DNA shows female movement patterns. Y chromosome data reveals male migrations. Both sexes traveled for love. But perhaps most remarkably, these networks survived catastrophes. During the last glacial maximum, when populations crashed and bands scattered, marriage networks endured. Ornament styles continued spreading, genetic diversity maintained, love found a way. At El Morón Cave in Spain, Red Lady tells one such story. Buried 19,000 years ago, she wore ornaments from multiple regions. Isotope analysis shows she grew up elsewhere. Someone loved her enough to carry her body to a special place, cover her in precious ochre, surround her with flowers. These networks did more than prevent inbreeding. They spread innovations, new tool techniques, hunting strategies, survival knowledge. They created safety nets. If your band's territory failed, marriage ties meant refuge elsewhere. They built peace. It's hard to fight your in-laws. We think of romance as modern, reflects Dr. Penny Spikins, but Ice Age humans loved, courted, negotiated marriages, suffered heartbreak. Their emotional lives were as complex as ours. The beads at Dolní Věstonice contained DNA traces. Multiple individuals handled them. Gifts passed between lovers. Family heirlooms carried to new homes. Each bead a story we'll never fully know. But we know this. In the coldest period of human existence, when survival seemed impossible, love wasn't a luxury. It was a technology. The drive to find partners beyond your birth group created networks that spanned continents. These networks carried more than genes. They carried knowledge, innovation, and hope. Your ancestors didn't just survive the Ice Age through tools and fire. They survived through connections that transcended distance, danger, and even death. They survived through love. And 30,000 years later, those ancient networks echo in every marriage that crosses boundaries, every relationship that bridges differences, every love that connects distant worlds. Picture this. You're standing on a vast grassland that stretches beyond the horizon. To the west, Siberia. To the east, Alaska. But you're not on either continent. You're standing on a ghost land that no longer exists. Welcome to Beringia, the lost world that connected Asia to America. For 5,000 years, this wasn't just a bridge people crossed. It was home. The numbers are staggering. When sea levels dropped 400 feet during the last glacial maximum, Beringia emerged as a landmass twice the size of Texas. That's not a narrow ice corridor. It's an entire subcontinent, complete with its own ecosystems, its own weather patterns, and its own human cultures. Dr. John Hoffaker calls it the center of the world for Ice Age humans. And he's not exaggerating. Here's what blows archaeologists' minds. People didn't rush across Beringia to reach America. They stopped, they stayed, they thrived. For thousands of years, humans lived on this land bridge, developing their own distinct culture. The genetic evidence is crystal clear. A population bottleneck shows humans were isolated here between 25,000 and 20,000 years ago. But what was life like on Beringia? Forget the image of a frozen wasteland. Fossil evidence reveals a mammoth steppe. Vast grasslands dotted with Arctic willows and grasses, supporting huge herds of mammoth, bison, horses, and reindeer. The landscape looked more like modern Mongolia than the Arctic Ocean that covers it today. These Beringians weren't struggling to survive. They were adapting, innovating, and waiting. Waiting for what? For the ice sheets blocking their path to melt. You see, even when the land bridge existed, two massive ice sheets, the Laurentide and Cordilleran, blocked the route south into the Americas. Beringia became a refuge, a waiting room at the gates of a new world. The people developed technologies perfectly suited to this unique environment, specialized hunting tools, improved cold weather clothing, and possibly even new social structures. Then, around 16,500 years ago, something changed. The ice began to retreat. Coastal routes opened. River valleys became passable. The descendants of those patient Beringians began moving south, carrying with them technologies and knowledge accumulated over millennia. Within just 2,000 years, humans had spread from Alaska to the tip of South America, one of the fastest colonizations in human history. But it wasn't random wandering. These were the descendants of people who had spent 5,000 years perfecting survival in Earth's harshest environments. Today, Beringia lies beneath the Bering and Chukchi Seas, but its legacy lives on in the DNA of every indigenous American, in archaeological sites from Montana to Chile, and in the profound truth it teaches us. Sometimes the greatest journeys require the patience to stop and wait. The bridge at the end of the world wasn't just a pathway, it was a crucible that forged the Americans. In the frozen darkness of an Arctic winter 8,000 years ago, a team of dogs pulls a loaded sled across the ice. Their cargo, volcanic glass from a Russian lake, destined for a trading post 2,000 kilometers away. This wasn't survival. This was commerce. Welcome to history's first superhighway. The discovery stunned archaeologists. At Zhukov Island, deep in the Arctic Ocean, they found obsidian tools. Sophisticated chemical analysis revealed their origin. Lake Krasno in Chukotka, Russia. The straight line distance? 1,500 kilometers. The actual route? At least 2,000 kilometers of frozen rivers, tundra, and sea ice. Dr. Yaroslav Kuzmin, who led the research, couldn't hide his amazement. This is not just long-range, but ultra-long-range transport of raw materials. Think about that distance. It's like traveling from London to Istanbul, on foot, in the Arctic, during the Ice Age. But here's what makes this discovery revolutionary. The obsidian wasn't carried by the people who mined it. Analysis shows a sophisticated exchange network with relay points every 700 kilometers. This wasn't desperate wandering. It was organized trade, complete with middlemen and established routes. The key technology: dogs. At Jokov Island, archaeologists found the remains of sled dogs, some of the earliest evidence of dog domestication for transportation. These weren't pets or hunting companions. These were engines of commerce, capable of pulling loads no human could manage across distances that would kill a walking man. Vladimir Pitulko, who excavated Jokov, paints a vivid picture. In March and April, when snow is still solid and days are getting longer, dog sled teams would have connected settlements across thousands of kilometers. But why obsidian? Why risk everything for volcanic glass? The answer lies in the blades. Obsidian fractures into edges sharper than surgical steel, literally sharper than modern scalpels. In a world without metal, obsidian was the ultimate cutting tool. It was the uranium of the Stone Age, a strategic resource worth traveling thousands of kilometers to obtain. The trade network reveals something profound about Ice Age humans. These weren't isolated bands barely surviving. They were connected communities sharing information, resources, and innovations across continental distances. When someone at Lake Krasno developed a new napping technique, people in the Arctic learned about it. When climate changed in Siberia, news traveled to Alaska. This ancient obsidian road operated 4 times longer ago than the famous Silk Road. It connected the Pacific to the Arctic Ocean, creating what researchers call trade hubs, prehistoric shopping centers where furs, amber, shells, and tools changed hands. Most remarkably, this network survived the Younger Dryas, that brutal cold snap 12,900 years ago. While other cultures collapsed, the Arctic traders adapted and persisted. Their dog sleds kept running, their obsidian kept flowing, and their connections held firm. Today, climate change threatens to reveal more of these ancient routes as permafrost melts. Each discovery adds another line to an emerging map of Ice Age globalization, a world where distance meant nothing to people with dogs, determination, and volcanic glass to trade. The ice sheets advanced like frozen tsunamis, crushing everything in their path. Mile-high glaciers bulldozed forests, filled valleys, and turned verdant lands into sterile ice. But life is stubborn. In scattered pockets across Europe, small bands of humans found something miraculous: ice-free islands in a frozen sea. These refugia didn't just save our species, they shaped who we became. Dr. Clive Finlayson, studying Gibraltar's caves, made a startling discovery. While northern Europe lay buried under ice, the southern tip of Iberia bloomed with life. It was like a Mediterranean Garden of Eden, he explains, when everywhere else was frozen hell. The evidence is written in DNA. Modern Europeans carry genetic signatures that trace back to 3 main refugia: Iberia, Spain and Portugal, the Italian peninsula, and the Balkans. Each refuge developed its own genetic fingerprint, its own cultural innovations, its own survival strategies. But these weren't resort destinations. Imagine 30,000 people, the entire human population of Europe, squeezed into a few scattered pockets. That's the genetic bottleneck revealed by our DNA. Humanity in Europe came terrifyingly close to extinction. In Iberia's Cantabrian mountains, humans took shelter in caves that became generational homes. At El Castillo and Altamira, they didn't just survive, they created some of history's greatest art. The famous cave paintings? They're not random decorations. They're the Netflix of the Ice Age, stories and survival guides painted on stone. Meanwhile, in the Italian refuge, centered around the Po Valley, humans developed different adaptations. Archaeological sites like Grotta Paglici show a diet heavy in small game: rabbits, birds, and snails. When you can't hunt mammoth, You improvise. These people became specialists in exploiting every available resource, a skill that would prove vital when the ice retreated. The Balkans refuge, tucked between the Carpathians and the Mediterranean, tells yet another story. At sites like Vindiga Cave in Croatia, we find evidence of the last Neanderthals. This refugium became a melting pot where our species' last great cousin finally disappeared, but not before interbreeding with modern humans one final time. Professor Oxala Garcia Rodriguez's groundbreaking 2024 research revealed something unexpected. These refugia weren't prisons. People moved between them carrying genes, ideas, and innovations. Maritime technology advanced dramatically as coastal routes became lifelines between isolated populations. When the ice finally began retreating 19,000 years ago, something remarkable happened. Like compressed springs suddenly released, populations exploded out of their refugia. Iberians moved north, Italians spread west, Balkan peoples pushed east. Each group carried unique genetic markers and cultural innovations developed during their isolation. The refugia created Europe's diversity. Languages, technologies, and genetic variations that define modern Europeans all trace back to these Ice Age sanctuaries. The Basque language, Europe's oldest, likely survived in the Iberian refugium. The artistic traditions that flowered in the Renaissance, they echo techniques developed in Italian refuge caves. Today, as we face our own climate crisis, the refugia offer a lesson. Survival isn't just about enduring. It's about adapting, innovating, and maintaining connections even in the darkest times. Our ancestors didn't just hide in refugia, they used them as laboratories for human innovation. The celebration was premature. After thousands of years of bitter cold, the world was finally warming. Forests returned to Europe. Megafauna populations recovered. Humans expanded from their refugia. Then, 12,900 years ago, in less than a decade, winter returned with a vengeance. Scientists call it the Younger Dryas. The humans who lived through it would have called it the end of the world. In Greenland, temperatures plummeted 15 degrees Celsius in just 3 years. 3 years. Imagine your hometown going from Los Angeles weather to Antarctica conditions before a child could learn to walk. Trees that had grown for centuries died in a single winter. Lakes that had thawed for generations froze solid and stayed that way for 1,300 years. Dr. Wallace Brucker, who first proposed the mechanism, described it as a massive heart attack in Earth's climate system. The patient survived, but barely. What caused this apocalypse? The leading theory reads like a disaster movie. As ice sheets melted, a gigantic freshwater lake, Lake Agassiz, larger than all the modern Great Lakes combined, suddenly drained into the North Atlantic. This freshwater tsunami shut down ocean currents that brought warm water north. The global climate system crashed like a computer hitting a fatal error. For humans who had just begun to taste prosperity, the Younger Dryas was catastrophic. In North America, the Clovis culture, those master mammoth hunters with their beautiful spear points, vanished from the archaeological record, not declined, not evolved, vanished. Dr. Vance Haynes, studying Clovis sites, found a stark pattern. Below the black mat, Younger Dryas layer, Clovis artifacts. Above it, nothing. It's like they just disappeared. But here's where the story gets interesting. While North Americans faced extinction, other populations adapted in remarkable ways. In the Levant, modern-day Jordan, Syria, and Israel, something revolutionary happened. Faced with starvation as wild grains became scarce, someone had a desperate idea. What if we plant these seeds ourselves? The Natufian culture, pressed against extinction, invented agriculture. At Abu Huraira in Syria, archaeologist Gordon Hillman found evidence of this transition written in teeth and seeds. Below the Younger Dryas layer, diverse wild plants, healthy teeth. Above it, cultivated rye, worn teeth from grinding grain, the birth of farming. This wasn't a gentle transition. Skeletal evidence shows malnutrition, violence, and population stress. Average height dropped. Teeth showed signs of repetitive strain from grinding grain. But they survived. In Europe, responses varied dramatically. Some populations crashed. Others, like those in Eastern Europe, actually increased. Dr. Isabel Schmidt's 2025 research revealed a massive population shift eastward following herds that adapted to the renewed cold. The Younger Dryas also triggered humanity's first documented migrations. Genetic evidence shows populations moving from Central Asia into America, from Africa into Arabia, from everywhere to anywhere that might offer survival. Most remarkably, this catastrophe sparked innovation. The bow and arrow appeared independently on multiple continents. Pottery emerged in Japan. Food storage techniques advanced dramatically. Faced with extinction, humans didn't just adapt, they revolutionized their entire way of life. When the Younger Dryas ended as abruptly as it began, temperatures rising 10 degrees Celsius in perhaps 50 years, humans emerged transformed. The descendants of Ice Age hunters had become farmers, potters, and architects. The foundation of civilization had been laid by catastrophe. The Younger Dryas teaches us that climate change isn't gradual, it's punctuated by moments of shocking transformation. Our ancestors survived by becoming something entirely new. Stand in any natural history museum and gaze up at the skeleton of a mammoth. Look at those massive tusks, that enormous skull. Now imagine this. In just 2,000 years, these giants vanished from Earth, along with giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, and dozens of other megafauna. The question that has haunted scientists for decades is simple. Who killed them? The answer is anything but. Professor Paul Martin fired the first shot in this scientific war with his blitzkrieg hypothesis. Humans arrived, megafauna died. Case closed. It's like following a trail of blood, he argued. Wherever humans showed up, extinctions followed within centuries. The evidence seemed damning. In Australia, megafauna disappeared 46,000 years ago, right after humans arrived. In the Americas, the extinction pulse hit 13,000 years ago, suspiciously close to human colonization. In Madagascar, it happened just 2,000 years ago, again right after human arrival. But Dr. Russell Graham saw it differently. Look at the climate data, he insisted. The Younger Dryas brought wild temperature swings. The mammoth's favorite plants disappeared. Their habitat fragmented into isolated patches. Humans didn't kill them, climate change did. Then came the twist. In 2021, breakthrough research by Dr. Matt Allentoft analyzed ancient DNA from hundreds of mammoth remains. The results: both camps were right and wrong. Here's what really happened. Climate change wounded the megafauna, fragmenting their populations into vulnerable pockets. Then humans delivered the killing blow. It wasn't murder or natural death. It was assisted extinction. The evidence is written in bones. At Predmosty in the Czech Republic, archaeologists found a site with over 1,000 mammoths. But these weren't random kills. Analysis showed selective hunting, mostly young males. The same pattern modern elephants face from ivory poachers. Humans weren't desperately hunting anything they could catch. They were selective, strategic, and devastating. But mammoths were just the beginning. Giant ground sloths, weighing as much as elephants, vanished from the Americas. In one cave in Brazil, researchers found sloth bones with cut marks dated to 12,600 years ago. Some of the last of their kind, butchered by human hands. The saber-toothed cat story is even more poignant. These apex predators had survived dozens of ice ages, but isotope analysis of their bones shows their final centuries were desperate. Their prey, mammoth calves, bison, horses, were disappearing. In their final years, some saber-tooths were eating each other. Cannibalism born of starvation. Dr. Jacqueline Gill studies ancient dung fungus. Yes, that's a real job, to track megafauna populations. Her work revealed something crucial. Large herbivore populations crashed before the climate changed dramatically. The smoking gun isn't temperature, it's the timing, she explains. Megafauna started declining when humans showed up, not when it got cold. But humans weren't mindless killers. At Kostenki in Russia, archaeologists found mammoth bone houses with storage pits full of frozen meat. These hunters were thinking long-term, preserving resources. The tragedy wasn't greed. It was that megafauna couldn't reproduce fast enough to sustain even careful hunting. The extinction had profound consequences. With megafauna gone, entire ecosystems transformed. The mammoth steppe, maintained by grazing giants, became tundra and forest. Fruit trees that evolved to have megafauna spread their seeds struggled. Even soil composition changed without massive herbivores recycling nutrients. For humans, it meant revolution. Without megafauna to hunt, we had to innovate or die. The result? Agriculture, animal domestication, and the roots of civilization itself. Today, as we face the sixth mass extinction, the megafauna's ghost reminds us, we've been here before. We are both the asteroid and the survivors. Deep in Lascaux Cave, your headlamp illuminates something that stops you cold. A thundering herd of aurochs charges across the stone ceiling, so vivid you instinctively step back. Horses gallop in perfect anatomical detail. A falling bison, pierced by spears, tumbles with its legs splayed in a way only someone who'd seen many kills would know to paint. This isn't decoration. It's a survival manual written in pigment and stone. For decades, archaeologists dismissed cave art as hunting magic or primitive religion. Then Dr. April Nowell made a discovery that changed everything. The animals weren't random. They were seasonal field guides. Look at the deer in Fond de Gaume, she explains, pointing to seemingly decorative details. Those aren't artistic flourishes. Those are September antlers, the velvet just shed. And the horses? Their coats show specific seasonal patterns. Winter fur, summer coats, pregnant mares in spring. The revelation was staggering. These caves weren't churches, they were libraries. At Chauvet Cave, dated to 36,000 years ago, the sophistication is breathtaking. Lions are shown hunting in coordinated groups, behavior that would be crucial to avoid. Rhinos display territorial markings. Bears are depicted in various seasonal states, from winter dormancy to summer aggression. But the real genius lies in the placement. Dr. Jean Klotz, studying Paleolithic caves for decades, noticed patterns. Dangerous predators are painted in hard-to-reach places, requiring effort to see, just like in real life, where avoiding them required vigilance. Prey animals cluster in accessible galleries, organized by season and behavior. The techniques themselves encode information. At Altamira, bison are painted using the cave's natural contours. Bulges become muscles, cracks become fur patterns. To understand the image, you must understand the cave. And to understand the cave is to understand the landscape, its augmented reality, Stone Age style. Some images are even more complex. The sorcerer at Trois Frères shows a human-animal hybrid surrounded by accurate depictions of animal mating behaviors. This wasn't fantasy. It was a teaching tool about animal reproductive cycles, crucial information for predicting herd movements. The abstract symbols haunted researchers for years. Dots, lines, geometric patterns seemed meaningless until Genevieve von Petzinger cracked part of the code. These symbols, replicated across Europe, were consistent markers. Calendar systems, clan signs, direction markers. We're still decoding, but their standardization across thousands of miles suggests information exchange networks we're only beginning to understand. Color itself carried meaning. Red ochre, found at every major site, wasn't just available, it was essential. Chemical analysis shows different ochre sources were specifically selected and transported hundreds of miles. The same red that marks important animals in caves is found in burials, on tools, and in living sites. It was the highlighter pen of the Paleolithic. The acoustic dimension adds another layer. At Resonance Cave in Spain, researchers discovered painted animals concentrated in areas with specific acoustic properties. Red dots mark spots where echoes last longest. Were these multimedia presentations combining visual and audio elements? Imagine stories told by firelight, with sound effects provided by the cave itself. Most remarkably, this wasn't regional art, it was a continental system. The same techniques, symbols, and seasonal markers appear from Spain to the Urals. Information was flowing across thousands of miles, preserved in pigment. Dr. David Lewis Williams argues we're looking at the world's first information technology. These caves stored and transmitted survival-critical data across generations. A child learning these images gained thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. The art of survival wasn't about beauty. It was about encoding intelligence in a form that could outlast any individual, any generation, any catastrophe. The painting survived the Younger Dryas, the megafauna extinction, and 30,000 years of human history. In our age of digital fragility, perhaps we should ask, will our information last as long as theirs? In Hohlfels Cave, Germany, archaeologist Nicholas Conard brushed away 43,000 years of dust to reveal something extraordinary. A flute carved from a griffon vulture's wingbone, so perfectly preserved that when researchers created a replica and played it, the notes rang true. A pentatonic scale that wouldn't sound out of place in modern music. But this wasn't humanity's first instrument. It wasn't even close. The Divja Babe flute, crafted by Neanderthals 60,000 years ago from a cave bear femur, suggests music predates our species. But it's during the Ice Age that music exploded into something revolutionary, a survival technology disguised as entertainment. Dr. Francesco D'Errico, studying these ancient instruments, made a startling discovery. The bones weren't randomly selected. Swan wing bones, mammoth ivory, cave bear femurs. Each material was chosen for specific acoustic properties. These weren't toys. They were precision instruments. At Isteritz Cave in France, archaeologists found a workshop, a literal Ice Age recording studio, over 20 flutes in various stages of completion, along with the tools to make them. But here's the kicker, they were standardized. The finger holes were placed using mathematical ratios that produce consistent scales. Mass production 35,000 years ago. Why did starving, freezing humans invest precious time crafting flutes? The answer lies in what music does to the human brain. Dr. Danielle Levitin's research shows that music activates more regions of the brain simultaneously than any other activity. It synchronizes groups, enhances memory, and triggers endorphin release. For Ice Age humans, music wasn't entertainment. It was social glue, memory aid, and antidepressant rolled into one. The archaeological evidence supports this. Musical instruments cluster at aggregation sites, places where multiple bands gathered. At Dolní Věstonice, where mammoth hunters assembled annually, researchers found not just flutes, but drums made from mammoth skulls, rattles from shells, and what appears to be a xylophone made from cave bear bones. But music was more than social lubricant. Dr. Stephen Mithen argues it was proto-language, encoding information in memorable patterns. Consider the challenge. How do you pass down critical survival information without writing? You sing it. Ethnographic studies of modern hunter-gatherers reveal song maps, musical journeys that encode navigation information. A melody might represent a river. Rhythm changes, indicating rapids or safe crossings. The Aboriginal Australian songlines preserve navigation routes tens of thousands of years old. Ice Age Europeans likely had similar systems. The instruments themselves tell stories. Bone flutes required months of preparation. First, selecting the right bone. Swan radius bones were preferred for their natural acoustic chambers. Then, careful extraction without damaging the bone. Cleaning, drying, and aging. Finally, the delicate process of boring finger holes, where one wrong move meant starting over. This investment of time only makes sense if music was essential, and it was. At Geysen-Klösterler Cave, musical instruments are found in the same layers as the earliest figurative art and symbolic ornaments. Music, art, and symbolism emerged together, the package deal of behavioral modernity. The rhythms themselves may be preserved in the art. Dr. Rupert Till studied the acoustic properties of painted caves and found something remarkable. Handprints and dots in caves often correspond to acoustic sweet spots. Were these rhythm notations? Sheet music on stone. Most intriguingly, the musical traditions show regional variations. German flutes differ from French ones in subtle but consistent ways. Like dialects in language, musical traditions developed regional flavors while maintaining underlying unity. This suggests music served as both unifier and identifier, marking your group while allowing communication with others. The bone flutes also reveal trade networks. At Hohlefels, one flute is made from a vulture species that didn't live locally. Someone carried that bone hundreds of miles, suggesting traveling musicians or traded instruments. In the flickering firelight of an Ice Age night, music would have transformed mere survival into something worth surviving for. It turned collections of individuals into communities, random sounds into shared meaning, and brutal existence into human experience. When we play these ancient flutes today, we're not just hearing notes, we're hearing the birth of human culture itself, preserved in bone and breath across 40,000 years of silence. In Hohlefels Cave, Germany, archaeologist Nicholas Conrad brushed away 43,000 years of dust to reveal something extraordinary. A flute carved from a griffon vulture's wing bone, so perfectly preserved that when researchers created a replica and played it, the notes rang true. A pentatonic scale that wouldn't sound out of place in modern music. But this wasn't humanity's first instrument. It wasn't even close. The Divje Babe flute, crafted by Neanderthals 60,000 years ago from a cave bear femur, suggests music predates our species. But it's during the Ice Age that music exploded into something revolutionary, a survival technology disguised as entertainment. Dr. Francesco Derrico, studying these ancient instruments, made a startling discovery. The bones weren't randomly selected. Swan wing bones, mammoth ivory, cave bear femurs. Each material was chosen for specific acoustic properties. These weren't toys. They were precision instruments. At Esturitz Cave in France, archaeologists found a workshop, a literal Ice Age recording studio, over 20 flutes in various stages of completion, along with the tools to make them. But here's the kicker, they were standardized. The finger holes were placed using mathematical ratios that produce consistent scales. Mass production, 35,000 years ago. Why did starving, freezing humans invest precious time crafting flutes? The answer lies in what music does to the human brain. Dr. Daniel Levitin's research shows that music activates more regions of the brain simultaneously than any other activity. It synchronizes groups, enhances memory, and triggers endorphin release. For Ice Age humans, music wasn't entertainment. It was social glue, memory aid, and antidepressant rolled into one. The archaeological evidence supports this. Musical instruments cluster at aggregation sites, places where multiple bands gathered. At Dolny Vestornicu, where mammoth hunters assembled annually, researchers found not just flutes, but drums made from mammoth skulls, rattles from shells, and what appears to be a xylophone made from cave bear bones. But music was more than social lubricant. Dr. Stephen Mythen argues it was proto-language, encoding information in memorable patterns. Consider the challenge. How do you pass down critical survival information without writing? You sing it. Ethnographic studies of modern hunter-gatherers reveal song maps, musical journeys that encode navigation information. A melody might represent a river, rhythm changes indicating rapids or safe crossings. The Aboriginal Australian songlines preserve navigation routes tens of thousands of years old. Ice Age Europeans likely had similar systems. The instruments themselves tell stories. Bone flutes required months of preparation. First, selecting the right bone. Swan radius bones were preferred for their natural acoustic chambers. Then, careful extraction without damaging the bone. Cleaning, drying, and aging. Finally, the delicate process of boring finger holes, where one wrong move meant starting over. This investment of time only makes sense if music was essential, and it was. At Geisenklastler Cave, musical instruments are found in the same layers as the earliest figurative art and symbolic ornaments. Music, art, and symbolism emerged together, the package deal of behavioral modernity. The rhythms themselves may be preserved in the art. Dr. Rupert Till studied the acoustic properties of painted caves and found something remarkable. Handprints and dots in caves often correspond to acoustic sweet spots. Were these rhythm notations? Sheet music on stone? Most intriguingly, the musical traditions show regional variations. German flutes differ from French ones in subtle but consistent ways. Like dialects in language, musical traditions developed regional flavors while maintaining underlying unity. This suggests music served as both unifier and identifier, marking your group while allowing communication with others. The bone flutes also reveal trade networks. At Hohlefels, one flute is made from a vulture species that didn't live locally. Someone carried that bone hundreds of miles, suggesting traveling musicians or traded instruments. In the flickering firelight of an Ice Age night, music would have transformed mere survival into something worth surviving for. It turned collections of individuals into communities, random sounds into shared meaning, and brutal existence into human experience. When we play these ancient flutes today, we're not just hearing notes, we're hearing the birth of human culture itself, preserved in bone and breath across 40,000 years of silence. Dr. Amanda Henry spreads the data across her desk. 2 sets of ancient teeth, 2 different stories. The first set, 40,000-year-old hunter-gatherer teeth, worn but cavity-free, telling tales of a diet that would make modern nutritionists weep with envy. The second set, 10,000-year-old agricultural teeth, riddled with cavities showing signs of malnutrition. Progress, it seems, came with a price. We think of evolution as improvement, Henry explains, examining isotope data from prehistoric bones. But the Ice Age body was a Ferrari. We've turned it into a minivan. Practical, but not what it was designed to be. The numbers are stark. Hunter-gatherers experience cavities in only 1 to 5% of their teeth. Post-agricultural populations, 10 to 85%. Ice Age humans stood taller, men averaging 5 feet 10 inches, women 5 feet 5 inches. After agriculture, men dropped to 1 foot 7 inches, women to 5 feet 2 inches. It took humanity 10,000 years to regain our Ice Age height, but physical changes were just the beginning. Dr. Herman Ponce's research on metabolism reveals something shocking. Despite their active lifestyle, hunter-gatherers burned roughly the same calories as sedentary office workers today. Their bodies had achieved perfect efficiency, extracting maximum energy from minimum input. The Ice Age body was calibrated for scarcity, Ponce notes. Now we've surrounded it with abundance. It's like putting rocket fuel in a Prius. The psychological changes run deeper. Dr. Sebastian Junger, studying modern hunter-gatherer societies, identified what we've lost. Constant physical contact, sleeping in groups, everyone knowing everyone. The Ice Age band was a 24/7 support group. Modern depression and anxiety, possibly the price of independence. Our sleep patterns transformed too. Dr. Jerome Siegel studied hunter-gatherer sleep and found they slept less than we do, about 6.5 hours, but with crucial differences. They woke once during the night, every night for about an hour. This wasn't insomnia, it was normal, a time for conversation, intimacy, and stargazing. Modern straight-through sleep, an industrial invention. The social changes were seismic. In a 30-person band, you knew everyone intimately. Conflict resolution was immediate and face-to-face. Compare that to our anonymous cities where you can live next to someone for years without knowing their name. Dr. Robin Dunbar's research shows our brains are still wired for 150 meaningful relationships. The Dunbar number, about the size of several related Ice Age bands. We gained civilization but lost community. We gained variety but lost nutrition. We gained comfort but lost resilience. Yet the gains were real. Life expectancy doubled. Child mortality plummeted. Knowledge accumulated rather than dying with individuals. Art, music, and literature flourished beyond Ice Age imagination. We traded quality for quantity, and the species thrived. Dr. Daniel Lieberman calls modern humans mismatched. Stone Age bodies in a Space Age world. Our cravings for fat and sugar, perfectly adaptive when such foods were rare, now kill us in abundance. Our stress response, designed for short-term physical threats, destroys our health when triggered by traffic jams and work deadlines. But we've also gained something profound: choice. Ice Age humans were shaped entirely by environment. We can shape ourselves. Modern medicine compensates for agricultural nutrition deficits. Exercise mimics hunter-gatherer activity. Meditation replaces fireside contemplation. Most intriguingly, we're rediscovering Ice Age wisdom. Paleo diets, intermittent fasting, barefoot running, co-sleeping with children. All attempts to reconcile our ancient bodies with modern life. Community gardens recreate gathering. CrossFit mimics hunting's varied movements. Forest bathing satisfies our need for nature. The ultimate irony? In trying to escape the harshness of Ice Age life, we've created new challenges our ancestors never faced. Obesity, diabetes, depression, isolation, diseases of abundance and comfort. As we face climate change, resource depletion, and social fragmentation, perhaps the Ice Age's greatest gift isn't what we gained or lost, but what we learned. Humans are infinitely adaptable. We survived the ice. We'll survive the heat. The question isn't whether we'll adapt, but what we'll become in the process. The skeleton tells a different story than expected. Buried 28,000 years ago at Sungir in Russia, the young man should have been a testament to Ice Age hardship. Instead, he's covered in mammoth ivory beads, 25,000 of them. Each bead took an hour to make. That's 3 years of labor adorning one person. This wasn't survival, this was wealth beyond imagination. Dr. Randall White has spent decades studying Ice Age burials, and his conclusion is revolutionary. We've been thinking about it all wrong. These weren't desperate people barely clinging to life. They had surplus time, surplus resources, and complex societies. The evidence is overwhelming. At Dolní Věstonice, archaeologists found a triple burial, 3 teenagers laid to rest 31,000 years ago. The central figure, likely suffering from a congenital disease, was sprinkled with red ochre and surrounded by pierced fox teeth and ivory pendants. The care lavished on someone who couldn't have contributed to survival speaks volumes. But it's not just burials. Dr. Olga Sofa's analysis of Venus figurines revealed something shocking. Detailed depictions of woven textiles, including complex twining techniques and elaborate headdresses. These weren't naked cave people, they were fashion designers. Look at the impressions on fired clay, Sofa explains, showing microscopic images. We see fine weaving, possibly made from plant fibers, different weaves for different purposes. These people had wardrobes. The nutrition data is equally surprising. Isotope analysis from bones across Ice Age Europe shows varied, balanced diets. Yes, they ate mammoth, but also fish, birds, plants, and small game. At Ohalo 2 in Israel, 23,000-year-old grinding stones contain residues from over 140 plant species. This wasn't desperation cuisine, it was sophisticated food culture. Population genetics reveals another surprise. Dr. Eske Willeslev's ancient DNA studies show Ice Age Europeans maintained stable, even growing populations through the last glacial maximum. While specific regions experienced bottlenecks, the overall picture is resilience, not decline. They were like wolves, Willeslev notes. Other species fled south or went extinct. Humans adapted in place. The technology wasn't primitive, it was perfectly adapted. At Kostenki, archaeologists found needles so fine they could sew waterproof seams. Spear throwers doubled throwing distance. Specialized tools existed for every task. Engraving, boring, scraping, cutting. The toolkit of a Gravettian hunter contained over 100 distinct implement types. Social networks were continental in scope. Shells from the Mediterranean are found in sites thousands of miles inland. Amber from the Baltic reached the Black Sea. This wasn't random wandering, it was organized exchange. Dr. Martin Sikora's genetic research revealed something remarkable. Ice Age humans had lower genetic disorders than agricultural populations. Their small bands and mobility patterns prevented inbreeding while maintaining genetic diversity. Natural selection was harsh, but effective. Art flourished beyond mere decoration. The Malta site in Siberia yielded carved swans so detailed that species identification is possible. Musical instruments show standardized manufacturing. Cave paintings demonstrate perspective, movement, and narrative composition that wouldn't be rediscovered until the Renaissance. Even child rearing was advanced. At Krems Wachtberg, a burial of premature twins shows they were kept alive for weeks after birth, in Ice Age conditions without modern medicine. The investment in non-viable infants reveals surplus resources and profound humanity. Dr. Eric Trinkhaus, studying Neanderthal and early modern human remains, found numerous individuals with healed injuries that would have required extensive care. These weren't societies where the weak were abandoned, they were communities where everyone mattered. The distribution of artifacts tells its own story. Personal ornaments aren't concentrated in a few rich burials, they're widespread. Tools show individual styles and maker's marks. This was a society with specialists, artists, and individual expression. Perhaps most tellingly, they had pets. At Przedmosti, a dog burial from 32,000 years ago included a mammoth bone placed in the dog's mouth. a final meal for the afterlife. You don't bury dogs with grave goods when you're starving. The myth of the nasty, brutish, and short Ice Age life dissolves under evidence. These were people who created art, made music, traveled continents, and buried their loved ones with care that spans millennia. They didn't just survive the ice. They built a civilization that left no monuments, but achieved something greater. It sustained human dignity in Earth's darkest hour. The old hunter stood at the edge of the forest, confused. Where once stretched endless tundra, trees now grew. The reindeer herds that his grandfather's grandfather had followed were gone, replaced by aurochs and deer that hid in woods. The reliable world of ice was melting, and with it everything his people had known for 1,000 generations. Climate change wasn't coming, it was here. 15,000 years ago, the Great Melt began in earnest, but this wasn't the gentle warming we imagine. Dr. Conrad Huon's ice core data reveals the shocking truth. Temperatures rose 10 degrees Celsius in some regions in just 50 years. Imagine New York developing Miami's climate before a child becomes a grandparent. For humans who had perfected Ice Age survival over 40,000 years, this warmth was catastrophic. The very skills that had saved them now became obsolete. At Starcar in England, archaeologists found the remains of the last hunter-gatherers trying to maintain their way of life. The site, dated to 11,000 years ago, shows desperate innovation. Wooden platforms built over new wetlands, specialized tools for forest hunting, headdresses made from deer skulls, possibly shamanic attempts to understand their changing world. But the biggest shock was dietary. Isotope analysis by Dr. Nikki Milner revealed a sudden shift from varied diets to heavy reliance on fish. The great herds were gone. The diverse plant foods were changing. These master survivalists were reduced to living on pike and perch. The social upheaval was even more dramatic. Band society, perfected over millennia, began breaking down. At Lipinski Vir on the Danube, we see something new. Permanent settlements. Houses with foundations. Cemeteries with hierarchical burials. The egalitarian world of the Ice Age was stratifying. Dr. Brian Hayden calls it the original affluent society's end. Hunter-gatherers had worked perhaps 20 hours a week. Early farmers worked 40 to 60 hours. Health declined, violence increased, but population exploded. Why did they do it? Why trade health and freedom for backbreaking agricultural labor? The answer lies in demographic trap theory. As climate warmed, populations grew. Territories that once supported a band now held 3. The old solution, fission and movement, no longer worked. Every territory was occupied. For the first time in human history, there was nowhere else to go. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, we see humanity's response to this crisis. Massive stone circles carved with dying Ice Age animals, built by hunter-gatherers 11,500 years ago. Dr. Klaus Schmidt, who excavated the site, called it the last stand of the hunter-gatherers. These weren't temples to gods. They were monuments to a dying way of life. The transition wasn't voluntary. Genetic evidence shows most European hunter-gatherers didn't become farmers. They were replaced by them. When agricultural populations arrived from the Near East 8,000 years ago, hunter-gatherer DNA largely vanished within centuries. The children of the ice were overwhelmed by the children of grain. But fragments of Ice Age wisdom persisted. In Scandinavia, the pitted ware culture maintained hunting and gathering alongside farmers for 1,000 years. They traded seal oil for grain, amber for pottery. 2 worlds coexisting until farming's demographic advantage inevitably won. The psychological impact was profound. Art changed from naturalistic animals to abstract symbols. Music shifted from portable instruments to fixed installations. Stories went from memorized epics to written texts. The direct, intimate world of the band became the abstract, hierarchical world of civilization. Yet something was gained in this loss. Writing preserved knowledge, agriculture supported specialists, cities enabled innovation. The warmth that ended the Ice Age way of life also enabled everything we call civilization. As we face our own climate crisis, the lesson is clear. Adaptation isn't optional. The Ice Age hunters' descendants didn't choose agriculture, it chose them. They could no more return to hunting and gathering than we can return to agriculture. Forward is the only direction. But perhaps we can learn from both worlds. The Ice Age taught us cooperation, resilience, and sustainability. The Warm Age taught us innovation, accumulation, and growth. Our challenge is synthesis, combining Ice Age wisdom with modern capability. The ice melted, and with it, a world. But from that meltwater grew everything we are. The question now is, as our world melts again, what will grow from us?